Well, good morning again, and welcome to Asking Through Adversity. My name is David Greenham, and I'm the chair of the Maine Arts Commission. We'll start again with an art break, and our art break for this session comes from our friends at Waterville Creates. Knowing that many of us lamented the restrictions on travel this year as a result of the pandemic, Waterville Creates launched a video series this summer called On the Road. The Waterville Creates team visited numerous destinations to explore Maine's incredible art, uh, artists, and natural landscapes. Now, this video features costume designer Travis Grant as he discusses the ways that he creates his craft as he works to build costumes for plays and musicals. Please enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Travis M. Grant and I am a costume designer by trade. I start by reading the script multiple times and then it comes down to research. I want to read about world history and clothing history specifically and see what I can glean from that information to kind of heighten the design and really make it interesting. So from there, I figure out kind of what my fabrics are, and as you can see, I like a lot of color and texture. I like weird colors. It's like a weird slimy snot green. It's so unattractive up close, but on stage, it's magic. You know, once you get it under the right light, it's brilliant. I will find one fabric that I'm in love with for a certain look. In this case, there's this beautiful plaid du peony silk that has these like rich eggplants and kind of avocado green, and really beautiful colors. And then I go from there. I look at all of those colors and I say, how can I build on this? How can I make this into a complete look? So I had the silk. I found a velvet that was similar. I found other fabrics that were in that same world and in that color palette and kind of built the garment around this one fabric. So these are pieces from Mary Poppins. This is Mrs. Corey and Fanny Corey, one of her daughters. And this is the fabric that I was talking about where this little tiny piece of silk inspired the whole garment. It's well tailored, it was built for the actor, and it was really kind of a touching, wonderful moment because she came up to me during tech and she said, I feel beautiful. I have a really hard time finding clothes that fit, and it's rare that I can ever find something that makes me feel beautiful, and for me that was, like, I knocked it out of the park on that. Because as great as the garment looks, if the actor is confident and feels good in what they're wearing, they're gonna give a great performance. And that is such a huge part of what I do. I can't hinder what an actor does. I have to be able to enhance what an actor does. You don't make the actor fit the clothing, you make the clothing fit the actor. So I can buy a man's suit off the rack, but if he is portly and on the shorter side, it's gonna be a hard time fitting the suit, but that's my job. We build them in the way that they can be taken apart quickly and put back together for ease of fitting. It may be in the future that I'll pull pieces from Mary Poppins and use it for Hello Dolly because it's roughly the same time period and I can make it work. You can see here on the inside of this garment that it has exposed seams and there's not a full lining in it, which helps with fittings overall and with reuse. We build extra seam allowance in at the center back zipper, which is one of the easiest alterations that you can do. And we also build in at the underarm and the shoulder, extra here. The human body is different, and it's not a straight line. So people are gonna have curves in different places, and swerves in different places that will, change the way that a garment fits. And for me, fit is very important. You never wanna send somebody out on stage looking like a dump truck. Nobody wants that. Other than actors, clothing is frequently the only other moving piece on stage. Fabric will swirl, feathers will bounce, and those are things that draw the eye and help to create the story because it tells you something about that person. If they're wearing a fussy hat with big bouncy feathers, you know something about that person. If they're wearing distressed rags that kind of creep and move on their own when the actor is barely moving, that tells you something. So as a designer, I'm telling a story. Just the same way that the actors, the director, the choreographer, the musicians, everybody else is telling the story. And that's kind of what we're all doing in collaborating, is telling this one story. And it's fantastic. I would say a solid 98 to 99% of our industry has been decimated by this pandemic. Broadway's shut down, regional theaters have shut down, school programs are being shut down. Reach out to your local companies, reach out to the Waterville Opera House, to Mainstay Music Theater, to whatever arts organization is meaningful to you and say, how can I help you? Say, can I make masks? Is there anything I can do to help you with cleaning your space and setting things up? Can I donate money? Is there anything that I can do that will help you get through this? And that's really all any of us can do right now, is just reach out and try and help. If you can, if you are able, in whatever way possible, reach out. Be a helping hand, be a lifeline for these organizations. They've brought you joy and they have helped, create this beautiful arts scene in your community. It's time for you to help them.
You'll ever come to a conference and hear the phrase slimy snot green. So glad to see everybody again. Like the challenge of travel, our next session focuses on another issue that many of our nonprofits are facing, that we're all facing. It's called asking through adversity. Our presenter for this session is Matt Lehrman, the Managing Director of Social Prosperity Partners. Building upon 20 years of nonprofit management, Matt co-founded the firm that works nationally to help nonprofit organizations assess their strategic situations, explore creative possibilities, and gather consensus and community support around productive plans of action. Following his 12 Tactics in 36 Minutes presentation, the webinar will continue to extend with our question and answers. And as you know, the chat is open, still keep going in the chat, but if you have questions at the bottom of your screen. Please, without any further ado, from Social Prosperity Partners, welcome Matt Lehrman.
David, thank you very much. I am going to take just 1 second here to share my screen and launch my slides. You should be able to see them in just a second. Come on, there we go. All right. Well, I'm delighted to be with you today. That was a marvelous video. Whoever produced that and the person who was featured, that was spectacular. I feel genuinely moved and understand that the reason we talk about even asking in the first place is to support the work of artists. And that was just a marvelous demonstration of the significance of the work that we do. I'm really grateful to follow that. So we're going to talk about asking through adversity. I want to just call your attention to, I was with you in Maine 2 years ago and 2 years before that. So even though we're talking through the computer today, in my mind, I'm remembering the lobster and the whoopie pies. And so anyway, in my mind, that's where I am. In reality, we are all in this position of disruption and change and uncertainty, and we feel a huge amount of stress in this moment. You are not alone. Here's the best evidence that I have of the kind of disruption and uncertainty that we're experiencing. In my firm, we've been surveying nonprofit leaders all over the country, and we've been asking, how far into the future do you feel confident making plans? This is the most recent response that we got. Look at this. 25% of nonprofit leaders are not comfortable making plans more than 30 days into the future. Over another quarter of the total can't make plans more than 90 days into the future. And almost a third of the additional population of nonprofit leaders says that they couldn't make plans more than 6 months into the future. Only 11.1% of nonprofit leaders say that they can make plans more than 1 year into the future. For this reason, I choose not to call the experience that we're having right now the new normal. When we can plan a year or more into the future, when we're confident in that, we will be in a position of strategy. We can call that the new normal, and we can make plans for now and soon and for later. But for right now, let's call this the raw normal. And in the raw normal, we are not strategically focused, we're tactically focused. We have to understand what's going on. We have to make adjustments on the fly, and we have to collaborate. We have to hold each other's hands and get through this moment. So what we're going to do in this session today is an espresso shot. If you don't like coffee, if you're not an espresso drinker, think of this as a Peloton exercise where we're just going to drive through 12 key points about how you ask through adversity. And I don't think I'm going to teach you anything particularly new or earth-shattering for you. If this is just a systematized common sense, the goal here is to deliver some actions and questions. By the way, at the end of this, I will show you how you can get slides and other resources that I'm going to reference here. And because the Maine Arts Commission asked, I'm happy to also offer one-on-one coaching to every single person who takes this session today. And I'll tell you how to take advantage and access all of that at the end of this. But and at the very end, I'll ask you to take out your cell phone because you'll text message as a way to access all this information, but you don't need it right now. My advice to you is to keep a little piece of paper next to you. Just draw 1 through 12 and make little columns for green, yellow, and red. And as I go through each of these 12 points, just make a note for yourself. Green means you think you're good. You and your organization, you're fine. Yellow means that you want to bring this back and have more discussion in your organization. And red means that I have hit a nerve and you know that this is something that you need to deal with in your organization right up front. Again, I'm going to go fast through all of this. So your little notes here gets you to remember what your initial reaction was to each of these points. Again, I'll send you the slides afterwards so you can go back and really manage the details and have all the notes that you need. Well, with that said, let's just get right into the situation that we all have today, which is that our missions are compromised and our money is threatened. And the essential lesson that we have today is, how do we keep our mission flowing and how do we keep the money flowing that makes our mission possible? These things are interrelated. Well, the key point here is that in this moment of adversity, when everything is grinding to a halt, we have to replace that with something. And the key lesson, the one word that I would ask you to remember for this entire session today, is that the key to overcoming adversity, the key to asking through adversity, is having a sense of purposefulness. All 12 of the points I'm about to go through for you all speak to how do you achieve and sustain and reassert purposefulness in your organization at this time. Let's go through the 12 points together. I hope you've got your little checklist with you, and there will be time for questions afterwards. So we will go for it. Here we go. Number 1, you have to care for your team. Let's remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It starts from the base where individuals have to take care of their basic needs. And then above that, people have to take care of their psychological needs. And you can only do things that are self-fulfillment when your basic and your psychological needs are taken care of. And in nonprofit organizations, not just arts organizations, but every nonprofit organization, we pay wages to supply for basic needs, and we create a culture that provides for psychological needs, a culture of inclusiveness and advancement and recognition. And when you've got volunteers working in organizations, skip the whole wages portion of it. We think people will take care of themselves. It's all about the psychological needs. So as nonprofits, our unity of purpose, our ability to pursue our mission is entirely because we've paid wages and we've created a culture. But in this awful moment in which we are existing, we can't assume that psychological and even basic needs are being taken care of. So this is incredibly important that you, as leaders of your organization, reach out to people within and ask them how they're doing. Make sure that their psychological needs are being taken care of. And I mean this like on an ongoing, direct, personal basis. If you're going to ask how someone's doing, you have to ask it in a way that shows that you really care. And basic needs, remember months ago, we were all, looking for toilet paper. It's as basic as that. You've got people who are engaged with you whose basic needs may be cash flow and basic foods and their family's health and their own health. Let's not make any assumptions that we can do the work of our organizations if we don't care for our team. Again, take out your scorecard, because that's all I'm going to say on this subject. You just mark it green, yellow, or red for how that goes for your organization. Let's do a second task here, a second tactic, which is that we have to take responsibility for this singular and pivotal moment in our nation's history, a reckoning of 400 years of oppression. And I know if you're asking, why are we talking about systemic racism in a topic about asking through adversity? It is exactly the reason why we're doing this. If we are not mindful, if we are not active and proactive about the ways that we as organizations work in this moment, then we are not involving our team. We don't have that unity of purpose, and we're not serving our communities the way that we're supposed to. And the link that I have is to this wonderful, it's one article that I found, but I'm sure you'll find other resources. But this article from theconversation.com talked about the ways that businesses and other organizations can defy systemic racism beyond just the statement of Black Lives Matter. Okay, I'm going to get to know, again, you mark green, yellow, and red for your organization. Have you, and not just as your purpose good or are you pure of heart, but have you taken actual steps to defy systemic racism? It's incredibly important in this moment. Number 3 is how you make multiple points of connection in your organization. Look, every nonprofit I've ever talked to knows they have a mission statement and a vision statement, and they have a value proposition in some way, and they have a history, and they have an in with their particular donors. They know how to ask the people that they've been successful with. And in that mentality, a point of connection kind of looks like the clasp on a necklace, which is there's one place where we just go, oh yeah, that's the reason they support us, and we move on. But in this moment, in these many moments in which we're living, it's important to make multiple points of connection. So rather than thinking about what is your clasp to a donor or to a stakeholder, I challenge you to think about what is the Velcro. How are there many different points of connection that adhere you to them and them to you? And let me make this really practical for you. Just imagine that we're talking not about your organization, but we're talking about Girl Scout cookies. I mean, the basic value proposition of a Girl Scout cookie is it has to taste good. I mean, it has to be really a delicious thing that you can open up a box and shove a whole line of Samoas directly into your mouth and down your throat. At least that's my experience with Girl Scout cookies. My question for you is, can you be smarter, or at least as smart as the Girl Scouts, in creating multiple points of connection? Because the question you have to ask is, it's not just that they taste good. It's, are they assertive? Are they personal? Do they come at you in a way that is direct? And if you've ever had your neighbor knock on the door, or your coworker come into the office with kids attached to them, you know that when they come to you directly, that is as assertive as it gets. Does it feel special? Well, there is a seasonality to Girl Scout cookies. You can't get them all of the year. That's part of what they do to make it special. Do you have confidence in the organization that by buying Girl Scout cookies, you also know that you are investing in leadership skills for young women? Of course, that's an important part that's going on here. What about the sense of belonging? Well, if you've ever had a Girl Scout member in your family, you know that it is a troop, it is a family, it is a community endeavor altogether. And do they make Girl Scout cookies convenient to buy? Well, yeah, you can't, at least out here where I live, you can't go in or out of a grocery store during cookie season without having the Girl Scouts there selling cookies. They are all over the place. The cars are parked on the side of the road, trunks open, and you can buy Girl Scout cookies everywhere. They make it incredibly convenient. So my challenge for you in your organization is, take those measures of convenience and assertiveness and confidence and being special and of creating a sense of belonging, and apply it to the way you are asking in this moment. So I'll just run down the list. I'm not going to talk about every single one, but have you made supporting your organization as obvious as it can possibly be, easy and recurring? Are you being assertive? This might be the most important of all of the ones that I point out here. Do you have a CRM program? Are you disciplined about using it? Are you following up with your donors every, 3 months or 6 months on some regular basis? Do you have a routine that you follow that you know works? And are you improving it and refining it over time? Are you able to convey confidence in your organization because you and your team members and your board members have the ability to capture stories and tell stories of impact, of personal stories that people have observed and gone through themselves. So when they're talking to other people, they can talk about your organization from a position of incredible confidence and personal relevance. Is your organization, does it feel collaborative? Does it make people feel special? Is there something seasonal and excitable about the work that you're doing? And lastly, that sense of belonging. When you bring donors into your organization, do you have only a top-down a structure here? Or is there any part of your community building that makes sure that your current donors are involved in welcoming your new donors and making a side-to-side, a lateral, a peer-to-peer connection so that your donors feel connected, not just to you and not just to your organization, but to each other, that they are a part of a community in support of your organization? This is what I mean by multiple points of connection. Again, score it for yourself: green, yellow, or red. Here's number 4. This is a moment as we've crossed into the new year to enlarge your sound. I'm thinking of choral organizations as a metaphor for what I'm doing here, because there's an expression that I heard once that says, we hear notes, but we feel chords. And we have to apply that to the way your organization asks for support. Now, there's a separate company, I'll tell you, they're called Tracom, Tracom, and they put out a sales training model that they call social styles. And I'm kind of loosely basing this on what they said, because I find their quadrant chart really effective. And in their quadrant chart, they say that that consumers, can be gauged on a scale, on a quadrant chart, of how assertive they are and how emotive they are. So if you are low assertive and low emotive, you're an analytical personality. That is, you make decisions based on facts. And if you are more assertive but less emotive, then you're a driving personality, which means it's not just the facts and the statistics that you care about, but you care about the deadlines and what can be accomplished and making things happen. But there are people who have emotional investment in decisions, and they're excitable. So those expressive personalities are motivated. They'll make decisions because they can get excited about it. And lastly, there are people who are motivated by personal relationships. We call them amiable, and they are driven by person-to-person connection. So when I talk about how do you enlarge your sound, you might look at this and go, well, gee, you know what? We do a really good job of putting out the facts or saying what the purpose is that we do here. But the folks at Tracom, and I'm going to echo this, will say that it's not just that you play these individual notes, it's that you have a strategy to play all of these notes together, that you make a chord. And so when you enlarge your sound, your asks can go back, and I might even advise you go back and look at all the mailings, all the communications, the emails, everything that you've sent out that's been asking for support over the last 9 or 10 months now, and score yourself. To what extent, you give yourself a point if they've been fact-based. Here's what we accomplished. Give yourself a different point if you said, here's what we still need to accomplish, purpose-based. Give yourself a different point if you got excitement, if you say, this is why this is important, and you could make people feel the moment. And then finally, here's why your support matters. Put a human face on it. Bring them to tears with what you're doing. If you can hit all 4 of these, facts and purpose and excitement and connection, then you're playing a chord. Then you are asking through adversity with a full-throated message as you could possibly get. But I bet if you go back through your organization's past 9 or 10 months of asking, I bet you're going to find yourself lopsided, that you're playing not all the notes that you could or should be playing in this moment. Green, yellow, or red for you. Be sure to mark it down. Here comes number 5. In this moment, I want you to acknowledge uneasiness. It's not your uneasiness. I want you to acknowledge the uneasiness of your donors and of the people who are in your community who you engage with on a regular basis. And we have to get to the root of the question, why are you anxious? Or why are you angry in this moment? In fact, there's a fascinating article I just read in USA, I think it was USA Today or CNN this morning, that said that that we can all be diagnosed with emotional exhaustion in this moment. This is a very important finding for all of us, because Mr. Rogers has this wonderful quote that I think the full quote is, if it's human, it's mentionable. And if it's mentionable, it's manageable. Well, we have to be able to mention the uneasiness and the anger that we're feeling. And those are what I would call skills of emotional intentionality. So the question that you should be asking yourself is, for you and for all the members of your team, for everyone associated with your organization, board to volunteers to staff, everyone, is what is our response when we encounter people who are demonstrating to us that they feel fear or anger or joy or sadness or disgust or ennui being boredom or annoyance? What is our response? I'm going to make this really practical for you, because the skills of emotional intentionality are best displayed as we deal with people wearing masks. And as we deal with people wearing masks, we have to see that, when people are feeling fearful for their safety, we have to demonstrate care for them. And when people are angry that they have to wear masks, and there are some, we have to remain calm and not feed into it. And yet there are people who, for whatever reasons, for themselves, they are in a joyful moment. They just had some good news, and we can't harsh that. So we have to pay attention and applaud them when we can. When they're sad, we have to give them comfort. When people are disgusted, we don't have to fight them. We just have to pay respect to it. We might have to point them in a direction to direct their disgust. And then lastly, we need to, when people are feeling annoyed and inconvenienced in some way, our job is to give them service. We think of these as index card skills that we can teach ourselves and train our staff to do this. Now, I just realized as I'm doing this that I forgot to do something when I shared my screen. So I'm going to do something a little messy here. I'm going to stop my screen share for just a second. I have to reshare it. But on my next screen, what I'm going to show you is number 6. And number 6 is about how do we renew our meaningful connection with our donors. And in order to do that, I'm going to play you a 60-second commercial from United Airlines. It aired in the 1980s, I believe, early 1980s. And I just want you to watch this commercial. The technology will be a little old, but I think you'll understand the point that I'm going for about renewing your meaningful connection. Here goes.
I got a phone call this morning from one of our oldest customers. He fired us. After 20 years, he fired us. Said he didn't know us anymore. I think I know why. We used to do business with a handshake, face to face. Now it's a phone call and a fax. Get back to you later, with another fax probably. Well, folks, some things gotta change. That's why we're gonna set out for a little face-to-face chat with every customer we have.
But Ben, that's gotta be over 200 cities.
I don't care. Thanks.
If you're the kind of business that still believes personal service deserves a lot more than lip service, welcome to United.
Larry, Louis.
That's the way we've been doing business for over 60 years.
Ben, where are you going?
To visit that old friend who fired us this morning.
United. Come fly the friendly skies.
Yeah. So we need to go and renew our meaningful connections with all of our old customers as well, if you will. So 2 pieces of advice here. One is, this is where you need to frack your database. And by frack, I mean, you need to go into your database and you need to explore the heck out of it. You need to get every last bit. 3 quick points that not every organization is remembering to do. So I will issue, I put a little pyramid behind here because everyone goes after their large donors and everyone knows to ask their sponsors and whatever. But not every organization has remembered to go back and get in touch with their prior large supporters. I mean, people who supported your organization 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe you've fallen out of touch with them. Maybe the people who had those connections years ago have left your organization. They're no longer a part. Doesn't matter. You need to go back and talk to those prior large supporters. You also need to talk to your longtime donors who've given of any dollar amount. If they've been given $25 a year, but they've been doing it for 10 years, they deserve a phone call. They deserve a connection. And also, once again, you need to go to your lapsed donors and get as individual, as personal as possible. People have fallen off, but this is the time to make sure you have left no stone unturned. What questions are you going to ask these folks? Like in the commercial, what are those salespeople going to ask as they go out and visit with their customers? Well, there are 3 basic questions. It's easy. It's how are you? How are you opens up a whole lot of opportunity right there. Then it's what are your hopes and priorities for the future, and what can we or what should we accomplish together? Why, if you can do that, then you can not be playing a game of Pac-Man. Because the worst thing you could be doing in asking through adversity is asking for dollars. The goal here is not to ask as many people as you can, as fast as you can, as hard as you can to donate money. Asking through adversity means that your job is to ask for intentions. You are the steward. You are not the steward of the person's money alone. You are the steward of your donors' intentions. So ask your donors, how are you? What are your priorities? What can we accomplish together? It's as simple as that. Now go ahead and grade yourself, green, yellow, red. All right, this one's a little fun. My number 7 for you is simply signage isn't enough. You've put up signs about we need to donate, we need to practice, good hygiene, we need support, we need all these things. Signage is never enough. And to prove that, I'm going to play you just a 20-second clip of my favorite episode of Seinfeld. Signage isn't enough. Here you go.
Ha, Jerry. Tonight you in it for a real treat. I'm personally going to prepare the dinner for you and the Mayodri.
Jerry, you okay?
Huh?
Is anything wrong?
Nothing.
You look like you've seen a ghost.
Signage isn't enough. So my number 7 point for you is that this is the time to be mindful of your need to create new rituals for change sensibility. I mean, what is going to replace the handshake in the near term? Whatever it's going to be, that might be your personal practice, but I'm actually thinking even more about your institutional practice. Like when I go to the grocery store now, I am like watching to see if someone who works at the grocery store is actually sanitizing the handle on the cart. Not that I've been into a retail store recently, but if I went in and saw a sanitation station like this, it's not just that it's there and that it's placed in the middle of the store. I want to see the salesperson walk over to the sanitation station, clean their hands, and then walk over to me. The ritual is what's important here, this practice that we regularly perform. What are the new rituals that are important for your organization as you're asking through adversity? This is time to pay attention to that. All right. Number 8 sets up a whole bunch. There's a whole sequence of them here that are all related together. This one is called reinventing relevance. And I just want to say it's a mistake to think that if we just get through the challenges that we're experiencing, that everything will go back to normal. So whether you're driven by the imperative or the opportunities that you see, this is a moment in which we all have to reinvent relevance. And the reason this is important is we're all of our organizations, we're used to the idea that we pick the low-hanging fruit. That especially when it comes to asking, we pick the low-hanging fruit. We ask the people who are easy because they know us and it's inexpensive and it's relatively low effort for us to ask the people who know our organization. But if we believe that we have to do more than that, we have to reach higher up into the tree, there's this wonderful quote from John Kenneth Galbraith that says the conventional view protects us from the painful job of thinking. Well, this is a moment where we need to engage in the painful job of thinking. So I ask you with me to chop down the tree. And I'm just going to stop right there. Reinventing relevance is about chopping down this low-hanging fruit tree and replacing it with a different way of thinking. And so the green, yellow, red that you're going to put here is, has your organization, how satisfied are you that you've started the process of reinventing your relevance? To your, I replace it with a quadrant chart that looks like this. On a quadrant chart that asks if people are aware of your organization and their capacity to support your organization. For people who are high capacity and highly aware, I call them devoted. They know you, they know your organization, they appreciate the mission that you serve. That's a relatively small number of people in your community, I suspect. There's a lot more people who are aware of your organization, but don't have the capacity, they don't have the long-term investment in you. And I call those people oriented. They might be open to going to arts and cultural events, but they didn't necessarily go to your organization specifically. In the lower left corner, people who I would say are low aware and low capacity, and this is not a pejorative, I'm not saying these are bad people or anything like that, but from a position of supporting your organization and being involved in your organization, I call those people asleep. And your job is simply to wake them up. And then the upper left corner, this quadrant of magic and wonder where all incredible things are possible, I call that quadrant uninspired. And the uninspired capacity are people who have high capacity. They have the time, they have the money. They're just doing other things with their time than being involved with your organization. And here's my quick test to see if you understand the concept here. Forget your organization, and let's just talk about French fries. And I think I mentioned this analogy the last time I was out in Maine, so some of you may have heard this before. If people are devoted to French fries, the only name brand condiment they would put on their fries is obviously Heinz ketchup. But if you're oriented to French fries, you'll put the generic ketchup or the catsup on it. The lowest common denominator that the asleep will put on their French fries, because you can't have naked French fries in my universe, that would be salt. But in the quadrant of magic and wonder where all things are possible, why, that's the quadrant where people put everything on their French fries, and you know what? They don't feel like they're missing out because they're not putting ketchup on their fries. So when I talk about reinventing relevance for your organization, the real question I'm asking is not, are you chopping down the low-hanging fruit? If you were reaching the low-hanging fruit, the tree would look just like this in front of you. The roots are in the devoted, and you advertise and you reach out to the oriented, and you pretty much give up at the top of the tree. And I know my gravity is flying up to the right there. But my point is this: in this moment, reinventing relevance means that you need to have a conversation in your organization about how you take the work that you do and expand it out. So have you done that? That's a green, yellow, and red question right there. Are you reinventing your relevance so that you have a strategy to serve your devoted, your oriented, you're asleep, and you're uninspired? You're going to get one take on the totality of this. And now I'm going to go through each of those quadrants individually as separate numbers. Number 9 is, are you delighting your devoted? Are you deepening the meaning of their connection? This is a supporter of the Las Vegas Raiders, and you know that he dresses up on game day and he feels an intense loyalty to his team. What do you do in your organization to ask your donors, your devoted donors, to stay close to you? Conventional stuff, you're doing special events and benefits, and you're giving insider information. You're asking them to advise you on your next season, and you're developing personal relationships. And I'm asking you, can you go even deeper? Green, yellow, or red, just on that. Number 10 is that quadrant of the oriented. You need to animate them. You need to get them involved. Animation beats observation. Think about when people go and visit the Mona Lisa, arguably the most popular work of art on planet Earth. They are not content to simply stare at the Mona Lisa in admiration. Instead, they turn their back on the Mona Lisa and they take a selfie that they can then share with their friends and family, probably while they're still standing in the same gallery with the Mona Lisa itself. And so my question for you is, what have you done to help your donors and your audience members animate their activity? Where's the place where you've sent the wish you were here postcard to them, right? And ask them to take action. Early in the pandemic, there were nonprofits that were saying, hey, let's put out teddy bears in front of our house and create a teddy bear scavenger hunt so that kids in your neighborhood can look for teddy bears all over the place. That was a sign of support for certain organizations. Conventionally, we put our logos on tote bags, and now you can put them on masks as well. Hey, I happen to be a Star Trek fan, if any of you know me. And when I don't have my blue igloo behind me and I'm just talking to friends, I might put the bridge of the Starship Enterprise behind me. But you know what? What have you done to create Zoom backgrounds for your donors and for your audience members that they might want to put behind them during this time to show their affinity and their affiliation with your organization? And how have you gathered people together in an online environment? And I really love the idea of having the gallery of participation so that people are feeling not just that they're engaging with a high level organization, but that they're engaging with each other on a lateral basis as well. That gets us to number 11, which is, what are you doing to wake up the asleep? Remember, the asleep were low capacity and low interest. What is your novel point of relevance for them? And I think about Tom's shoes for a second. Tom's very, very successful, but every pair that you buy, they donate a pair to someone else. And I always ask the question when I'm with a live audience, are they the best shoes you ever owned? For people who own them, no one has ever told me that Tom's shoes are the best shoes they ever owned, but everyone has said that they feel good about buying Tom's shoes because they know that by buying Tom's shoes, they're helping someone else. In this moment, I ask you, what have you done in your organization to be a point of relevance to someone else? Look at all these headlines of arts organizations who are helping the homebound and elderly and healthcare workers and teachers and students. What has your organization done in this moment to awaken the asleep? And you know what? If you give yourself a low grade on this, that's not a failure, because I understand you've been involved in trying to keep your own organization and your own self going here as well. But look forward. We still have months ahead of us in this pandemic. What can you still do going forward? And then the 12th point is, what can you do to inspire the uninspired? Let's just remember the ALS Association gave us permission to have fun with the bucket challenge. What's that, a year or two ago now? You know, what have you done to give the uninspired permission just to have fun? And my best example of, well, one of my favorite examples is, just like the Wisconsin Democrats assembled the cast of The Princess Bride to do a live reading of the script, which was just totally fun. It doesn't have to be, major Hollywood stars. Are you reading bedtime stories? Are you playing music? Are you doing something for fun to entertain? Because somehow asking through adversity doesn't always have to be as heavy as, we have need, we're trying to sustain, we're trying to get through this, can you please write us a check and help us? Just help people have fun, be a source of light. Okay, as we reach the very end of this, I want to make one last point. Asking through adversity means that this is a moment where you should be asking, is your organization positioned merely as the beneficiary of your community's generosity? As nonprofits, we're used to asking all the time. But I want to leave you with the thought that relevance, reinventing your relevance, also involves your organization's capacity to contribute to the recovery and health and collaborative spirit of your community. The economic recovery, the public health, and the inclusive, supportive, collaborative spirit of your community. That's the core sense of purposefulness that drives your organization and keeps its mission moving, and thus keeps the money going, which feeds the mission, which keeps the money going. If you are feeling overwhelmed, it's totally understandable. My advice for you is to keep remembering that while the future is unknowable, it's incredibly malleable, which means that the actions that you take today even small ones, can have huge increment of impact over time. So in the Q&A we're going to go to in just a second, I'm curious, how did your scorecard turn out? What did this reveal about you, and what are you going to do? Finally, let me just say, if you want a PDF of these slides, I'm happy to send them to you. And if you would like a one-on-one strategy discussion, I'm scheduling it for free. There's no cost, there's no obligation. Also, if I've hit on some points here that you'd like to share with others, I've started writing a series of white papers to go a little bit more in depth into some of these things. There are 2 of them available right now, and more on the way. If you want links to all of these things, including the ability to sign up for the strategy session and get the slides, then take out your phone and text the word tactics to the number 66866. And I believe this is going into the chat as well, so you'll all have it in writing as well. But you text the word tactics to the number 66866, you'll get a bounce back message that asks for your email address. When you do, you will show up on my email subscription. You will receive, probably within about 5 or 10 minutes, a bounce back email that has all the links for everything that you're looking for, so you'll have it immediately. If you are outside of the United States, or if you don't get a message back in like 10 or 15 minutes, just email me at matt@mattlehrman.com, and I will send it to you directly. If you're already on my email list and you do this, you're probably not going to get an email back. So matt@mattlehrman.com gets you there. If you want to know more about me and the work that I do, I'm at socialprosperity.us. Kirsten, it's time to let me invite you to unmask yourself. And let's see what kind of questions. Oh, there you are. Let's see what kind of questions are here. Let's have some conversation, because we've reached the end of my espresso shot.
Super. Yeah, if folks have questions, please post them in the Q&A box, and I'm going to be reading them off to Matt, and we'll be, I guess he'll be talking about them. I'll just be reading the questions. I might say a thing or two, but I don't know. I guess there's one of the things is about doing this with such limited capacity. I think that was something that people have been talking about with strategy. If you're going to be engaging in this sort of thing, especially with a reduced income, sometimes reduced staff, like how do you maintain care for your team in such a situation, or things like that?
Yeah, so how do you care for people when you're even still trying to care for yourself? Look at all of us. We are all in our homes. We all have our health issues for ourselves, for our families. We've got our cash flow issues. We're worried about our careers. We're worried about whether our organizations are still going to be there, our jobs are still going to be there. I mean, these are all real things. The only answer to this is we have to help each other. You don't need a sermon for me on this, but there is this story, Kirsten, I heard in summer camp years ago, of this land in which people are they have planks on their arms so they can't bend their elbows, and in front of them is a huge banquet table, but the people are starving because they can reach the food but they can't get it to their mouths. So that looks really cool on the video, just like that. Well, the discovery is that while you can't feed yourself, you can reach to the side and you can feed other people and they can feed you. And that sense of collaboration, that sense of mutual support, I think that's the spirit that we need to, that I think a lot of people have been doing in this time. I don't mean to assume that no one's been doing this in the past, but I think that's kind of the secret to how do we get through this. We have to help each other because we don't have the capacity to do this all for ourselves all the time.
Okay, let's see.
And by the way, if the questions aren't pouring in, everyone who's watching this, I would really love to know, like, how many green, yellow, and red did you each have on your thing here? I would love to know if there are people who said that they came in like with 6 or more red, or that they were 6 or more green. Would be really interesting to know. Oh, I see Denmark Art Center just said all yellow. See, that one just popped up in front of me. I'm glad to see, this is good. If it's yellow, that means that you've got things to go back and talk with your team and with your board and even with your stakeholders. And that's important. Oh, good. Caroline just wrote 6 green. I applaud you. That's good. That also means that you've probably found some things that are worth paying attention to as well. And I'm glad to hear that. Chartreuse. Chris, well, I don't know what color chartreuse is. Oh, Paul says yellow and red, no green.
So is there some kind of, like, differentiated strategy depending on how much red versus how much green you find yourself in? Like if, like if you,
You know, I didn't structure this like a Cosmo quiz where when you add this all together and you know and you come out with a passing or a failing score. That's not really my point here. In the very short time that we have together, what I really wanted most was for people to very quickly identify where are there some sensitive points or some weak points. What could they go back and work on together? And so I'm hoping that people who have identified things that are red or things that are yellow, you know, that this prompts you to have some courageous conversations in your organization and say, you know, there are things that we should be paying attention to. And you know what? Where there are things that you've marked as green, this is also a chance to go back and talk to other members of your team and make sure that they think that your organization is green there too, because sometimes your perspective may be different than someone else. And if someone else has marked it as red and you've marked it as green, perhaps you can help them out of the hole that they're in, or perhaps they're going to ground you to a reality that you haven't paid attention to.
we've got a question about what exactly are those one-on-one sessions about, and what do those involve? What are you offering?
It's whatever you want. I've made it easy for you to have a 40-minute conversation. And when we talk, I'm simply going to ask you, you know, what did you mark as yellow? What did you mark as red? And what's your strategy to deal with this? One of the white papers that I offer is about this concept that that this is a lousy time for organizations to engage in strategic planning, but I'm very much interested in what I call imperative planning, which is how do you move your organization toward goodness, even when capacity is just so limited. So we're just going to talk about what your priority is and who you need on board and how you made the how you make progress in all of this. And so it's completely confidential. It's completely no obligation. But you know, having just given you this fire hose of stuff, I wanted to give everyone, actually, I should say, Maine Arts Commission wanted to make sure that everyone who was watching here had kind of a relief valve, so that we could just slow down long enough to talk about what makes sense in your organization.
And I'm getting a question about like advice you might give to small organization introverts, where you don't have enough, you know, capacity to hire or get somebody who's that extroverted voice, and you're much more. It's not really in your skill set to really be doing some of the things that you're talking about needing to get done. What's some advice you could give to those folks?
Yeah, so there's one video I didn't include here. Remember at the end of City Slickers, where Billy Crystal asks Curly, you know, what's the most important thing? And Curly says it's one thing, and Billy Crystal says, what's that? And he says it's for you to figure out. This is why, Kirsten, I think the one-on-one sessions can be so valuable. If you're an introvert, let's have the conversation. Let me help you figure out what is that one thing, that strength that you have that would be easy for you as a next step to move your organization forward. I'm not here. I'm not pushing a particular agenda. I'm not going to shove a particular methodology down your throat. We simply want to find one thing that you can do, and that you can do well, and you can do comfortably, or just maybe just a little bit uncomfortably, that moves your organization forward in a way that's appropriate to your community and appropriate to your organization.
Great. And that kind of dovetails into another question about more clarity about refurbishing your connectors, and how that kind of what kind of advice or techniques might you recommend for that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. So I listed out those 5 major connectors. And I like the idea that, you know, there are these 5 things, but that's not supposed to be an exhaustive list. So frankly, this is a great exercise with a bottle of wine. It's a great drinking game where you get, you know, a half a dozen people on a Zoom call, and you got to take a shot every time you can't think of some other way to connect with donors. And like, you know, can we get 50 ways of connection? Can we get 100 ways of connection? Just can we brainstorm the heck out of this thing? I'm not coming at this with a particular sense of which of these is the most important priority. Every organization does some things incredibly well, and every organization has some things that for whatever reason they've avoided doing, or they've just not done in the past. There's a trajectory that everyone's on. What I want to see in this moment is I want to see us have fun. I want to see us push the envelope a little bit. And mostly I want to find things that are effective and appropriate to individual organizations. So if you've done a great job of getting people excited, that's wonderful. But have you done as great a job of being personal and following up with people after the fact? I talk about CRM discipline. I mean, like, do you actually like have everyone's birthdays in there? Are you sending a birthday card to them as a regular thing? Are you just checking base with them 6 months or 3 months before the scheduled renewal of their ask, where you're just touching base to say, we're planting a seed today for what's going on in the future? That's the kind of opportunity that exists there, and the possibilities are unlimited.
It sounds like that kind of goes into another question about kind of reconstructing your relevance and sort of the practices and examples that you might be able to give in doing that, besides just, you know, going into the donor bases. Do you have any other sort of examples or of that being successful organizations or people you've worked with who've been able to reconstruct these connections and the relevance of their organization with their donors or with their base?
Yeah. So Kirsten, this is the question that people always ask is, can you give me an example of someone else who's doing this? And every time someone says, you know, can you give me an example? I think they're trying to take a shortcut way of figuring out what the answer is without doing the work for themselves. So with all due respect, what I have to say is go Google organizations like you, and, you know, choruses that help, or museums doing, you know, responding to the pandemic, or theater companies respond, and give yourself 30 minutes to go and see what other organizations are doing in this moment. And if that doesn't inspire you, if you can't find other people who are doing really interesting, valuable things, then you're not looking hard enough, or you haven't figured out how to use, use Google search effectively. But I really want to see people exploring the possibilities here. There's no, in this moment, we understand the world needs the work of arts and culture today more than ever. We need to see the world through other people's eyes. We need relaxation. We need tolerance. We need appreciation of beauty. We need to get out of our own heads. We need to get out of our own houses. The works that we do is so important. And, you might remember in a prior webinar that I taught, I would put up a picture of Anne Frank, because her wonderful quote about how wonderful it is that no one needs to wait a minute to improve the world. That's the moment that we're in now. No one needs to wait a minute. And your donors are key to that. And they need to be told that supporting your organization is how they don't wait a moment, because your ability as an organization to come back depends on their ability to champion that.
Great. I'd like to share, if for those of you that didn't make it to the NEFA Creative Grounds webinar that was before this one, they're a great resource for finding other New England arts organizations and what they're doing if you're looking for models. Besides just a Google search, these are organizations you can sort by, and that's a great resource as well. I see in the chat, the Maine Association of Nonprofits has a great list of tools about nonprofit organizations, what they're doing, how they're doing them, and really is a good support mechanism. We're kind of coming to the 11:30 mark, so if there's any final comments you'd like to leave us with or ideas to share at the very end, Matt, now is, I think, the time to share them.
I'm just really grateful for everyone who was here. Hey, before you leave this one, everyone, go ahead and write into the chat what was useful from this session for you. Just leave one bullet point or something in the chat of what specifically you might want to do as a result of this, or what was impactful for you. I think I'd be curious to read that. And I know that everyone over at the Maine Arts Commission is very curious to hear that as well. So thank you all. I'm just grateful to be able to spend this time. And if anyone has access to whoopie pies, I will gladly send you my address, because, man, I love those things.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your presentation with us again, Matt. It's great to see you. It's always, you always have good things to say that inspire, get us thinking. Please, folks, if you can, follow up on his generous offer to do sessions with Matt. It's, also, if you have questions about stuff with the Maine Arts Commission, contact our office. We're here for you. We want to help you and really, work on this together. So yeah, please call Matt, today, tomorrow, sometime soon, and always, use the Maine Arts Commission as a resource.
Fantastic. Kirsten, give them one more second. I see more chat stuff coming in, and I
Oh,
see
my
a lot
goodness.
of people are putting in their thoughts on what was useful to them. And again, I thank you all for sharing your comments here. The most important thing is that we all have the ability to move forward together, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. So Kirsten, again, thank you so much.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, a lot of folks talking about rethinking the purpose, rethinking how they're going to be engaging with other folks. So it's really nice to see that.
I see a lot of people are talking about the Whoopie Pie Bakery as well. I think,
Yeah.
Kirsten, if I'm right, the MICA was in Lewis. Was it in Lewiston last year or 2 years ago?
We had it in Portland last year, and then it was Lewiston the 2 years before that.
I think you're exactly right. And so it was in Lewiston where I had the whoopie pies at that bakery that someone just said.
Yeah,
I can't get those out of my head.
All
All right.
Well, okay. Well, on that note, we're gonna let folks get on with their break and their lunch and their business, and we'll see folks again this afternoon, I guess. Please come back to the additional workshops we have in the afternoon.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.